So my next guest on my podcast is, well, you've probably seen her on a podcast before if you're from Bristol, and keep your eye out on podcasts because she's inimitable on the scene and a real authority on what we're going to talk about. So it's Joyann Boyce from IncluedAI. She knows everything there is to know about Gen AI and bias within it in particular and how to deal with that and handle it. So I'm sure we're going to have a fascinating conversation on how we handle that, how it's going to change the world, what you can do about it, how we protect ourselves. So look forward to hearing more. Welcome, Joyann. You are the first guest in our new office. Very exciting to be here.
It is very, very gorgeous in here. Like, I'm jealous. I might have to join the team. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think there might actually be an open invite. So, it's first time in the new space. Really good to have you here. For our listeners and viewers, would you like to just give a little kind of intro to you and Include and what you do?
Oh, okay. I always was like, where do I start? I was born in, no. So my name is Joyann Boyce. Fast forward a couple of years. I'm the founder of Include, which is a platform to detect bias in content. We're building the anti-bias AI, testing new things with it all the time. But my background is marketing. So I've been an inclusive marketing consultant for the past 7 years, advising brands how to not make things that are racist, sexist, ableist, all the isms, telling people no a lot of the time, but also inspiring creativity. And yeah, I'm also a data scientist. So mixture of creative and a lot of numbers in my background.
A creative geek.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Why have I not? I'm taking that one.
Okay. So we were just reminiscing that about a year ago, in fact, I think it came up on my sort of LinkedIn feed as being a like 1 year ago thing. We were on a panel talking about AI together, and it was in like probably peak hype moment, I would say. About 6 months after ChatGPT sort of came and took the stage, which is now, we're now about 18 months into ChatGPT. What do you think about like what's happened in that year and how things have changed?
Oh, so much is happening. I think I remember saying on that panel I wanted to rebrand AI as a term. I still want to, because now there's so much has changed, but the way people think about it generally is like, oh, now they think of AI, they think of generative AI. Nothing else, no other versions, no predictive. They're like, oh yeah, generative AI, that's AI. I'm like, no. At the time, everyone was talking about Terminator, I think was the scary part of it. But it's exciting. I think we've gone through the highest point of the hype cycle, and now everyone's kind of starting to actually apply it to their day-to-day, to their practical uses. So it's a good phase to be in.
Yeah. I think that, the predictions at the time were that now, like, everyone's jobs would be different. It would all be like a totally upside down. And it just really isn't quite like that, though. It's just, but it's interesting how, like, the realities, like, it's actually further on in some areas than we expected. But, like, for the most part, it's remarkably similar to how it was a year ago.
Yeah, it's further on in terms of its fine tuning. Like the hands are better in generative images. That was a big thing then. Yeah. So bad at hands and feet. Most
of them have now 4 fingers.
4 fingers and not an extra. There's still, in my field, there's still a few things that people are trying to do that is just not ethical. So there was a company recently that launched a model to recognize emotion. OpenAI had their version of that as well, and it's still like, I'm sure that's not going to work out great, but people are still trying to use it for cases that I don't think it should be used for. So that's not changed. But I think a lot more businesses of all sizes are integrating it in really practical ways.
Yeah. One thing I've seen on sort of the other side of it is a big increase in marketing automation emails that I receive, which I think generative AI has had a big part to play in.
Yes, I love our marketers, but we do ruin everything. we get too excited, and then a couple of, even in my inbox, I'm getting emails that are like, I know you're not writing this. I can tell, I can spot it now. I can feel the AI in it. But it's beautiful, but it scares me sometimes because when I first got into marketing, I was a social media manager, and the first things you had to do was like that grunt work, that like, writing posts over and over again. I had to write a lot of puns about oranges. The bane of my life, but I am great at puns now. But if someone wants to start an industry, they'll just go to a generative AI model, get it to write a bunch of punts and not know how to filter through what's good and what's bad. So that's my worry about, like, for people starting in any industry, are we going to start skipping steps?
Yeah, and maybe like my status as good dad joke teller for my kids is going to get ruined because they're going to be all AI generated now. Yeah, oh, no. That'll be shocking. So one of the things that I'm quite interested in your view on, because it's your area of specialism, is whether the models are starting to get more or less biased. Because on the one hand, we've had like quite a lot of effort go into debiasing them in certain areas. Sometimes a little bit misplaced. The Gemini image thing, maybe a little bit controversial.
The Gemini one, so my controversial take on it is that it was perfect and they should not have taken it down, because what people forget with generative AI models is that it's meant to be imaginative. It's meant to, you give it a prompt and it's trying to imagine what that could be. So if you prompt for the Pope and it puts the Pope as a black person, that is a thing it can imagine. The fact it being factual is never meant to be.
Yeah.
AI is never meant to be factual. It's all about predictions, all about guessing. So I think Gemini and all of that was fine. I just think the world wasn't ready.
Yeah, we shouldn't have been using it to try and generate historical stuff. We only should be using it to generate future stuff. Yeah, that's an interesting stance to take on it.
But they took it down. I'm like, oh, Google, hang in there. But in terms of models in general, I think we're at a weird phase where they're getting better at putting the guardrails in a lot of models and trying to mitigate some of the things very well known, so gender biases, race biases. But I think they're getting worse because more people are using them without knowledge. Whereas before, when it was those who knew a little bit about AI, like before ChatGPT and all of that jazz, we had our tests in place, we had our things in place, not always catching everything, but at least we were the ones in the code or in the thing to do it. Now these models are being trained by the general public, and factually, the general public that created all those biases in the first place, society created all of that. So we're starting to get into this loop of the models just reinforcing all the negative things that we don't want them to do.
And do you think the models could be generating their own loops beyond that as well? Because so much of the internet content now is AI generated, and that's then feeding back into the models. So if it's bias coming out, it's going to be bias coming back, and you could end up with a bit of an echo chamber effect.
Huge, and we're approaching that. It's predicted in about 4 years, 90% of the internet content would be AI generated. So
that's pretty scary.
Yeah, when we hit that point, it's going to be, okay, how far back are we going? Are we going where we're going to see campaigns and ads of like women in the kitchen should belong in the kitchen kind of vibe? And we don't want that. We know what we did wrong as a society, and we want to do better, and we want to be innovative, but we need to know that these models are trained historically on all of this bad stuff. I use the analogy a lot in my work around a puppy, and how a puppy trained in someone else's house, you have no idea how it's been trained, if it's been taught to eat shoes or whatever, until you bring it into your own house and it does that. And then you have to start unpicking it. So I think any businesses, organizations that are interacting with models that have been trained by other companies, the big ones, just know that it's going to come with a whole heap of biases. It's going to start eating your shoes before you know it.
Yeah. So do you think do you think we need to be training our own? You need to be more models that you train yourself and actually know the content of them, and that's the thing.
I think so, and I think we also need to kind of get into an area of, on food packages where they have the labels of the sugar and the levels. Everyone doesn't read them. Some people do, some people don't. But as a user picking up that food, you're making a choice. I would love for us to get into a society where when AI models are being integrated in anything decision-making, anything content, we're declaring it. And if there is some kind of bias, we're declaring it so the person can take in that information and choose to be like, oh, this was written in a British perspective, so therefore it's more likely to be kind to the king and kind to those things because it was written and trained on that data that's British focused.
Yeah, interesting. One of the sort of locally quite exciting things is with Isambard AI coming along, that should hopefully give us the compute power locally to actually generate more models ourselves. So you actually know what's in them. I'm so excited for
Isambard, especially because they're opening up projects to small businesses to get involved. I have a pet project. I want to do it, but I don't want to do it because it's a PhD level thing. And I don't want to do a PhD. I did my master's. I haven't.
Are you sure? You don't sound convinced.
Because it's so fun, but I also want to make money. But I want to map every single bias in the world. And I think Isambard is the perfect computer to do it. Because we always think when we think of biases, the big ones, racism, sexism, all of those. But even down to like veganism and different views on veganism. And how do different societies view that? There's some cultures within India where it's not really a thing because the majority of the population are vegetarian anyways. So there's no real hard stance on it. So yeah.
There's a weird thing in India when I went there. So my sister-in-law's Indian, and when I went out for the wedding, her brother was like, "Should we sneak out for some non-veg?" It's
a whole other perspective.
Yeah.
And then when you start mapping all of that and then start adding the country and the historical perspective, it's so vast. I'm imagining it in like a full cloud of like different things, and how the future of AI that I see is that being able to fine-tune those biases for where it's being used and being aware of when it can impact something negatively or positively.
So moving on from bias to diversity, it's something that's always been on my mind since the original hype, was that maybe AI will change the diversity of the workplace and who's successful in it quite significantly, in terms of, if you're using it, you're going to get ahead and you're going to be doing much better. And maybe that will be grouped around some socioeconomic groups in particular, or maybe along some sort of cultural lines or something like that. But on the other hand, maybe AI could be a bit of a leveler, because like anyone can use it. It's bringing down the barrier to entry for some stuff. So yeah, where do you kind of stand on this, and where do you think it's heading?
It's a tricky one, because I think it's going to widen the divide that we already have. I feel like the young people or diverse backgrounds, anyone within the organization already in a job and already has that experience, will be able to use AI to increase their productivity, benefit the organization. But those entering the roles, those who aren't already in the building, are going to get harder opportunities to get into it. So a lot of industries, there's a lack of diversity and representation of women, people of color, disabilities, and I think that divide's going to widen. One of the beautiful things that happened during COVID was that a lot of work from home enabled organizations to hire a lot of diverse, in terms of ability, staff. But when we went back to working in the office, a lot of that freedom and that ability to hire disabled communities went out the window as well. And I worry that AI is going to have people fall on it and start removing the ability to engage with diverse communities, because they're going to rely solely on the AI to pick up the things that having diverse voices in the room will do for you. But as an organization, I think it's really risky. I think you still need to incorporate a diverse team throughout all seniorities of an organization, even if you're using AI, because of the bias problem. Only in having diverse voices in the room are you going to be able to spot the issues with the bias. Even when we recommend our software to clients, we say, okay, we're going to flag things to you for your marketing content, but you need a diverse team to help you think of a creative way to replace it. Because the same team that came up with that bias text or whatever is going to continue, they're going to end up wasting time, money, and resources. So
they might just shift from one bias to another.
And you just keep going. Trust me, there's a long list you can go through before you get to a good campaign. So when you are using tools, even our tool, it's a way of improving the talent in the room, but the talent in the room is best served when it's diverse. Companies make more money, they are more creative, they reach wider audiences. And on that leveler element, I think it's a leveler for small businesses necessarily who weren't able to afford the best. So I think that's where it's probably the leveler, not necessarily for people from diverse backgrounds getting into industries. So for example, a small business owner who couldn't afford to have their own bespoke stock photos or branded content can use AI to generate that because they didn't have the budget to do that. I think that is a place where it could be good. And for the creatives as well, they're not having to reduce their price to fit that demand. They can now be a little bit more bespoke, be a little bit more upskilled of like, okay, we want to do a big campaign, we want to do something that's really unique rather than generating things that, in every role you have the work that you're like, oh, do it just because of the money. Everyone now has the opportunity to be more creative, I think. I think that's the benefit of it. No matter background, everyone has the opportunity to be more creative, to be more refined. And small businesses have the opportunity to get access to things that they probably couldn't afford. But in terms of diverse backgrounds getting into workplace, I worry that it's going to widen that gap.
I think it's potentially going to make it difficult to get it into the workplace more generally, because a lot of the work that AI does is the grunt work, so to speak, it's the stuff that juniors in an organisation would typically have done. So, in the legal profession, it's like scouring through old legal cases and coming up with that sort of thing. In the developer world and software development, like juniors have historically been doing that sort of first draft code that's been like so heavily reviewed, and now the Gen AI is actually taking on a lot of those tasks, which some businesses are thinking, well, that means we just don't need juniors anymore, we only need seniors. And then where do the seniors come from if there's
no juniors?
And it kind of feels like that pool of people who are going to get picked into the workplace is somehow getting smaller. And if it's getting smaller, then what are we going to be choosing on? And it might be things that are more affected by a lot of sort of undiverse, biased kind of background things.
We can end up going backwards and just picking people. Like I used to work in recruitment for a short while, and some law firms that we would send candidates to, if it wasn't Red Brick University, we did not send them.
Yeah.
And that was like an unwritten rule of the organization, which is terrible, because getting into Red Brick University is another level of bias, and it keeps going down and down. But I think businesses have an opportunity to actually understand what is the actual skill those seniors have. And I don't think it's knowledge in doing the work. I think it's people skill. I think seniors in almost any role, let's take creative for an example, are able to talk to the board or the CEOs or the higher ups, figure out what they're saying and refine it. And you only get that skill from doing all of that work over the years and going back and saying, this is what I did. Is this what you asked for? This is what I did. Is this what you asked for? So I think it's an opportunity. We're an opportunity now to change what that entry level work is like. Because a lot of the times we'd give that entry level work and not really explain the why. Yeah. Now it's all about the why. Yeah. Now they need to know, okay, if you need to make 5 edits, or we need you to explain your code and explain all the options for doing it. Why are you coding it in this way? Why are we using Python versus HTML? You need to understand the why across the board, even if you're getting the AI to do it. Yeah, and certainly in software development as well, I think it's shifting more to the need to understand business needs and actually what people are trying to achieve, and defining good, and then passing that through into the technical world. That skill seems to be becoming more and more important, and it's not something that's going to be solved by Gen AI anytime soon. No, we're going to need to do a lot more peopling. Is my favorite thing. A lot more people skills. So last 12 months, not 12 years. It's 12 years that we've been in our old office. So 12 years is on my mind, and in our old building rather than this one. But 12 months, it's moved on a bit, not as much as we think. Next 12 months, what do you think for you and Include? So much has happened in the past. So I'm trying to think. Well, we recently received an Innovate grant. So that is, thank you very much. Very hard to get. Yeah, really stressful. Highly competitive. Yeah. So we're using that momentum to completely build out our MVP, and we now have a waiting list. So we're slowly integrating with a couple companies, making sure that we can customize the language detector for them. So our motto right now is inclusive languages, not one size fits all. So we're trying to make sure that we're able to have a model that's customized for the use case of the organization. Right. And that's a lot of nerdy fun, a lot of creative nerdy fun, a lot of really deep diving into the history of words and the context in which they can be used in different societies. There's a lot of British words that are okay for us, but not okay for the Americans, and vice versa. English is a lovely language, but it's very complex.
Yeah.
And also for myself, continuing to explore the development in AI models and testing them for bias, which is what I do a lot for some clients. And just really, I'm excited for the future, more so because we're realizing as a society how useful tools can be, but how dangerous they can be as well. And I think there's a huge opportunity to use these tools for good in so many ways. So yeah, I'm continuing to hope that our company will do that and get out there. But yes, sign up to our waitlist if you want to get access to IncluedAI.
Great, thank you. We will. Well, brilliant. Thanks very much for joining me in our lovely new office. Hope to see you here again soon. I'm sure there'll be lots of events and stuff happening here. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.